The hidden cargo. The cargo hauler Eidolon drifted between stars like a ghost that refused to die. Its hull was a patchwork of mismatched plates, welded scars, and faded markings from a dozen previous owners. The ship had been repaired so many times that no two sections carried the same shade of metal. Some panels were newer, polished faintly by recent work, while others were dull and pitted, whispering stories of impacts that should have torn the ship apart. Yet it still flew. Barely. Inside the cockpit, Kale Aaron sat alone, one boot resting against the console, fingers idly tapping against a cracked navigation display. Outside the viewport stretched an endless void, dark, cold, indifferent, pierced only by distant stars that flickered like dying embers. Kale had spent half his life staring at that emptiness. He had learned long ago that space didn't care if you lived or died. It didn't care if your ship failed. It didn't care if you were alone. And right now, he was very alone. Another flawless delivery, Kale muttered under his breath, his voice rough from disuse. The ship's AI didn't respond. It never did. The Eidolon Drift wasn't that kind of ship. Its systems were barely functional, its voice modules fried years ago during a bad jump. Kale had never bothered fixing them. Silence was cheaper. And safer. He leaned back, letting his head rest against the worn seat. The faint hum of the engines vibrated through the ship, steady and familiar. It was the only constant in his life, a low, rhythmic sound that told him he was still moving, still alive. Still surviving. The cargo hold behind him was sealed tight. According to the manifest, it carried industrial reactor components, cheap, low-grade parts bound for a mining colony on the edge of civilized space. Kale hadn't checked. He rarely did. In his line of work, curiosity got people killed. You took the job. You moved the cargo. You asked no questions. That was how you stayed breathing. His fingers paused against the console. Something felt off. He couldn't explain it. The instruments read normal, engine output stable, life support steady, navigation locked. Everything was fine. And yet, Kale frowned. There, a sound, so faint he almost convinced himself he'd imagined it. A soft scrape. Metal against metal. He held still, every muscle tightening instinctively. The sound came again. Not random. Not mechanical. Intentional. Kale's eyes shifted slowly toward the rear corridor. No, he murmured. The cargo hold was sealed. He had personally locked it before departure. No breaches, no alerts. Nothing should be moving back there. Nothing living. Slowly, deliberately, he pushed himself to his feet. The silence inside the ship deepened, pressing in around him like a weight. Another scrape. Closer this time. Kale's jaw tightened. All right, he whispered. Either I'm losing it or someone's about to regret boarding my ship. He reached for the plasma cutter mounted beside the cockpit door. It wasn't meant to be a weapon, just a tool for cutting through damaged panels or stubborn cargo seals. But at close range, it would burn through flesh just as easily as steel. He checked the charge. Still good. The corridor beyond the cockpit stretched into dim light, the overhead strips flickering intermittently. Kale stepped forward, boots echoing softly against the metal floor. Each step felt louder than it should have. The ship didn't feel empty anymore. It felt occupied. Watching. Waiting. Another faint sound echoed from the cargo hold. A weak scratching. Kale exhaled slowly, steadying his breathing. Stowaways, he muttered, or worse. He had dealt with both before. Neither ended well. Reaching the cargo door, he paused. Listened. Silence. For a moment, he almost turned back. Almost convinced himself it was nothing. Then, a soft, broken sound. A whimper. Kale froze. That wasn't a machine. That wasn't a threat. That was small, weak, afraid. His grip on the cutter loosened slightly. What the hell, he whispered. Carefully, he keyed the manual override. The cargo door slid open with a long, reluctant hiss. Darkness spilled out to meet him. For a moment, the interior remained shadowed. Then the overhead lights flickered to life, illuminating rows of stacked crates, dull gray containers lined up in neat, silent columns. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Kale stepped inside, his senses sharp, eyes scanning every corner. I know you're in here, he said, voice low but steady. You've got one chance to come out. No responses. Just the hum of the ship. And then, a faint scratching sound. From the far corner, behind a cluster of crates, Kale turned slowly, raising the cutter slightly. Every instinct told him to be ready. He moved forward, each step careful, controlled. The sound came again, weak, uneven, like something struggling. Not attacking, not hunting, just trying. He rounded the final crate and stopped. For a heartbeat, his mind refused to understand what he was seeing. Shapes. Small, curled shapes pressed into the corner. At first, they looked like shadows. Then one of them moved. A head lifted slowly, trembling with effort. And eyes, bright molten gold, opened. Kale's breath caught. You've got to be kidding me. There were three of them. Three small bodies huddled together, wings wrapped tightly around themselves like fragile shields. Dragon hatchlings. Their scales were dull, lacking the sheen of health. Their frames were thin, too thin, ribs faintly visible beneath the surface. Their wings were underdeveloped, membranes almost translucent in the dim light. They were starving. The smallest barely moved, her breathing shallow and uneven. The middle one leaned heavily against the largest, her head drooping with exhaustion. And the largest, she moved, slowly, painfully, but deliberately. She shifted forward, placing herself between Kale and her sisters. Protecting them. Even now. Even like this. Kale stared at her, something twisting in his chest. Dragons, he whispered. Illegal. Dangerous. Valuable beyond measure. Entire fleets had gone to war over creatures like these. And here they were, hiding in his cargo hold. Dying. The largest hatchling bared tiny, weak fangs, a low hiss escaping her throat. It wasn't threatening. It was instinct. The only defense she had left. Kale slowly lowered the plasma cutter. I'm not here to hurt you, he said quietly. She didn't move. Didn't trust him. Of course she didn't. Why would she? Humans had probably done this to them. Loaded them into a crate. Left them here. To starve. Kale's jaw tightened. Figures, he muttered, someone couldn't be bothered to finish the job. His gaze swept over the hold. No containment units. No feeding systems. No care. They hadn't been transported. They'd been discarded. His stomach twisted. The smallest hatchling let out another weak sound, a soft, broken chirp that barely carried across the space. Kale hesitated. He knew what he was supposed to do. Seal the hold. Report it. Walk away. That was the safe choice. The smart choice. The choice that kept pilots alive. Instead, he took a slow step forward. The largest hatchling tensed, her body trembling as she tried to stand taller. Kale stopped immediately. Easy, he said softly, I'm not going to hurt you. Silence. Then, carefully, he knelt, bringing himself lower. Less threatening. For a long moment, neither of them moved. They just watched each other. Then Kale reached slowly to his side and pulled out an emergency ration pack. It wasn't much. Processed protein. Dense. Flavorless. But it was food. He tore it open, the scent filling the air. Instantly, the smallest hatchling reacted. Her head lifted weakly. Nostrils flaring. Hunger. Raw. Desperate. The middle one stirred as well, eyes flickering open. The largest hesitated, then glanced back at her sisters. Kale saw it. The moment she decided. She stepped forward. Each movement was unsteady, her legs trembling under her weight. But she didn't fall. She reached him, paused, and then she snatched the food from his hand. Vast, instinctive. Kale didn't react, didn't pull away. He simply watched as she retreated. And instead of eating, she broke the food into pieces and gave it to her sisters. Kale's chest tightened. You're still looking after them, he murmured. Even starving. Even dying. She fed them first. The smallest hatchling devoured her piece with desperate urgency. The middle one ate more slowly but just as hungrily. Only after they had both eaten did the largest take her share. Kale leaned back slightly, exhaling. 3 sisters, he said quietly. It felt right. He didn't know why. They dumped 3 sisters on a cargo hauler and hoped nobody would notice. The largest hatchling lifted her head, watching him as she chewed. Her golden eyes were sharp. Aware. Intelligent. More than they should have been. Kale shook his head. This is a terrible idea, he muttered. Keeping them meant risk. Huge risk. If anyone scanned his ship. If anyone found out. He could lose everything. His ship. His freedom. His life. He looked at them again. 3 small bodies huddled together. Barely alive. Alone. His gaze softened. Yeah, he sighed, I was never good at making smart choices anyway. He pushed himself to his feet. All right, he said, if you're staying, we've got problems to solve. The largest hatchling tilted her head slightly, as if trying to understand. Kale allowed himself a faint, tired smile. First, he said, you need food, real food. He glanced around the cargo hold. Second, we need to keep you hidden. Because out here, dragons weren't just rare. They were hunted. And somewhere, someone had already decided these 3 weren't worth saving. Kale looked back at them. They were wrong. The smallest hatchling shifted slightly, curling closer to her sisters. For the first time, her eyes met his. And she didn't look afraid. Not as much. Kale exhaled slowly, something unfamiliar settling in his chest. Responsibility. Yeah, he said quietly, I know. The ship hummed around them, carrying them deeper into the void. Carrying secrets. Danger. And now, 3 fragile lives that depended entirely on one stubborn pilot who should have known better. Kale Aaron turned toward the door, already planning his next move. Behind him, the largest hatchling watched. Silent, observing, as if she understood more than she should. As if she already knew that their survival was now tied to his. And far beyond the drifting ship, hidden in the darkness between stars, something had already begun to search. Fire in the dark. The Eidolon drift had always been quiet. Not peaceful. Never peaceful. But predictable. The steady hum of failing engines, the occasional rattle of loose plating, the whisper of recycled air through worn filters. It was the kind of silence Kale Aaron understood. The kind that didn't change. Until now. Now the silence had layers. Soft, uneven breathing in the cargo hold. The faint rustle of wings too weak to lift. The quiet, almost imperceptible scrape of claws against metal as 3 fragile lives adjusted to survival. Kale stood at the threshold of the cargo bay, arms folded, watching. 3 days. It had only been 3 days. And everything had changed. The hatchlings were still thin, too thin, but they were no longer dying. Not immediately. That alone felt like a victory. Not dead, Kale muttered under his breath, we're setting the bar high. He stepped into the hold, careful not to startle them. They noticed him immediately. All 3 heads lifted. All 3 pairs of golden eyes locked onto him. Still wary, but no longer terrified. That was progress. The smallest of the 3 made a soft chirping sound, pushing herself upright with visible effort. Her wings fluttered weakly, catching the dim light. She was the first to approach him now. The bravest, or perhaps the most desperate. Kale crouched slowly, pulling a small container from his belt. Easy, he said, you'll get your share. He opened it, revealing a thick, dark paste, nutrient concentrate stripped from the ship's emergency reserves. It wasn't meant for dragons. It wasn't meant for anyone, really. But it worked. Barely. The smallest hatchling reached him first, nudging his hand with her snout. Her movements were clumsy, uncoordinated, but stronger than before. Kale allowed himself the smallest hint of a smile. Yeah, he murmured, I figured you'd be first. Behind her, the middle sister moved more slowly, her steps careful, her gaze constantly shifting between Kale and her surroundings. The cautious one, always watching, always thinking, and the largest. She stayed back, always observing, judging, protecting. Kale had noticed it on the first day. She never ate first, never moved first. Everything she did was calculated around the safety of her sisters. Even now she remained near the far crate, her body angled defensively, eyes fixed on Kale. He met her gaze. "You can relax," he said quietly. "If I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't have waited 3 days." She didn't respond, but she didn't retreat either. That was enough. Kale scooped a small portion of the paste and held it out. The smallest hatchling devoured it instantly, a soft, eager trill escaping her throat. "Hey, slow down," Kale said, gently pulling back. "You'll choke." She ignored him completely. Of course she did. The middle sister approached next, more hesitant. She paused just out of reach, studying him. Kale didn't move. Didn't rush her. Eventually she stepped forward, taking the offered food with careful precision. Controlled. Measured. Even starving, she maintained discipline. Kale nodded slightly. "Smart," he murmured, "that'll keep you alive." The largest remained still. Watching. Waiting. Only when her sisters had eaten did she finally move. Slow. Deliberate. Her steps no longer trembled. Not as much. She stopped just short of Kale, her golden eyes locked onto his. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Kale extended his hand. She hesitated. And then, she accepted. Not snatching. Not rushing. Just taking. Trust. Small. Fragile. But real. Kale exhaled slowly. "Good," he said, "we're getting somewhere." The problem started on the 4th day. Kale knew something was wrong the moment he stepped into the cockpit. The console lights were flashing. Red. Persistent. Annoying. "Ah, that's never good," he muttered. He dropped into the pilot's seat, scanning the display. Long-range sensors. Active. Tracking. His eyes narrowed. That's not possible. The outer lanes were dead space. No patrols, no traffic, no reason for anyone to be scanning this sector. And yet, something was out there. Far, but closing. Kale leaned forward, pulling up the sensor feed. The signal was faint, distorted by distance and interference. But it was there. Moving. Vast. Too fast for civilian traffic. His stomach tightened. "No," he whispered. He checked the cargo manifest again. Reactor coils. Nothing special. Nothing valuable. Nothing worth hunting. Unless. Kale's gaze drifted toward the rear corridor. Toward the cargo hold. Toward the 3 lives he wasn't supposed to have. "You've got to be kidding me." He ran the numbers again. The trajectory. The speed. The angle of approach. It wasn't random. It was tracking him. Kale leaned back slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Of course," he said bitterly, "of course it is." He should have known. Nothing valuable ever came without a cost. And dragons. Dragons were priceless. Someone had hidden them on his ship. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And now, someone else had come to collect. Kale exhaled sharply, pushing himself to his feet. "All right," he muttered, "time to make some bad decisions." The cargo hold was warmer now. Kale had rerouted power from secondary systems, boosting heat output to keep the hatchlings stable. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. For now, the sisters looked up as he entered. They sensed it. The tension. The shift. Animals always did. The smallest chirped softly, tilting her head. The middle one stilled, her body going rigid. And the largest. She stood. Fully. For the first time. Kale froze. "Well," he murmured, "that's new." She wasn't strong. Not yet. But she was no longer helpless. Her wings unfolded slightly, stretching behind her. Her stance widened, placing herself between Kale and her sisters. Protective. Always protective. Kale raised his hand slightly. Easy, he said, I'm still on your side. Her eyes didn't leave his. But she didn't attack. That was something. Kale nodded slowly. Good, he said, because we've got a problem. He moved closer, crouching down. There's a ship out there, he said quietly, and I'm pretty sure it's here for you. The words meant nothing to them. But the tone did. The smallest pressed closer to the middle. The middle shifted, wings tightening. And the largest. She stepped forward. Closer to Kale. Not away. Toward him. He blinked. Huh, he said softly. That was new. He met her gaze. Yeah, he said, I don't like it either. Tail moved quickly. There wasn't much time. The unknown ship was still distant, but closing fast. Too fast. He returned to the cockpit, fingers flying across the controls. Engine output maximized. Shields barely functional but active. Navigation rerouting. He plotted a new course. Unpredictable. Erratic. Not a straight line. If they were tracking him, he needed to make it harder. Not impossible. Nothing was impossible. But harder. The engines roared to life, the ship shuddering as it accelerated. Come on, Kale muttered, hold together. The Eidolon drift groaned in protest. It wasn't built for this. It wasn't built for speed. It was built to survive. And right now, that would have to be enough. The sensor alarm pulsed again. Closer. Much closer. Kale swore under his breath. They're fast, he said, way too fast. He adjusted the trajectory again, pushing the engines harder. The ship shook violently. Warning lights flared. Yeah, he snapped, I know. Another sensor ping. And this time, a visual. Kale's breath caught. The ship on the screen was sleek. Dark. Military. Not a patrol. Not a trader. A hunter. Great, Kale muttered, just great. The first shot hit without warning. The Eidolon drift lurched violently, alarms screaming as the hull rattled under the impact. Kale slammed against the console, teeth gritting. Shields down to 30%, he growled. That's not good. Another shot. Closer. Stronger. The ship shuddered again. Somewhere in the distance, something exploded. Cargo hold, Kale's eyes widened. No. He bolted from the cockpit. The corridor blurred as he ran, the ship shaking around him. Hold together, he muttered, just hold together. He reached the cargo bay and slammed the door open. The sisters were huddled together, fear radiating from them. The smallest cried out a high panic sound. The middle pressed close, wings trembling. And the largest. She stood, facing the door. Facing him. Ready. Kale dropped to one knee. Hey, it's all right, he said quickly. I've got you. The ship shook again. Closer this time. More violent. Metal groaned overhead. Kale looked up sharply. That's not good. He turned back to them. Listen to me, he said, voice firm. You stay here, you stay low, and you don't move, understand? They didn't understand the words. But they understood him. The smallest quieted slightly. The middle steadied. And the largest. She didn't look away. Not from him. Not even as the ship trembled again. Kale met her gaze. I'll handle it, he said. He didn't believe it. Not really. But he said it anyway. Because someone had to. Back in the cockpit, the situation had gone from bad to worse. The hunter ship was close now. Too close. Another blast rocked the Eidolon drift, sending sparks flying from the console. All right, Kale muttered, that's enough. He gripped the controls tightly, eyes narrowing. If you want them, he said under his breath, you're going to have to work for it. He slammed the throttle forward. The engines screamed. The ship surged ahead. And for a brief moment, It almost felt like escape. Then the hunter ship matched his speed. Effortlessly, Kale's stomach dropped. Yeah, he whispered, that figures. Another shot. Closer. Deadly. The Eidolon drift shuddered violently. Hull integrity warnings flashed. Come on, Kale growled, come on. And then, something changed. The sensors flickered. The hunter ship hesitated. Just for a moment. Kale blinked. What? He checked the readings again. And froze. Energy spike. From inside his ship. From the cargo hold. No way, he whispered. Another spike. Stronger. Brighter. Impossible. Kale turned slowly toward the rear corridor. What are you three doing? In the cargo hold. The air shimmered. Heat. Light. Power. The sisters stood together. Not hiding. Not afraid. The smallest trembled, but her eyes burned brighter than before. The middle's wings spread slightly, her gaze sharp, focused. And the largest. She stood at the front. Head raised. Eyes blazing gold. A faint glow pulsed beneath her scales. Growing. Building. Something ancient. Something powerful. Something that had been sleeping. And was now waking. Back in the cockpit, Kale stared at the readings. At the impossible surge of energy coming from three creatures that had been on the edge of death just days ago. You've got to be kidding me, he whispered. The hunter ship adjusted its course. Slowing, repositioning, as if it had noticed, as if it understood. Kale's grip tightened on the controls. Yeah, he said softly, I think I just made things a whole lot worse. The Eidolon drift hurtled through the void, caught between Predator and something far more dangerous. Something awakening within. And Kale Aaron realized with a sinking certainty that the three starving hatchlings he had chosen to save were not helpless. They had never been helpless. And whatever was coming next would change everything. Wings of fire. The Eidolon drift was dying. Kale Aaron knew it with the same certainty he knew the feel of a failing engine or the sound of a cracking hull. The ship had carried him through years of bad decisions, narrow escapes, and impossible odds. But this was different. This was the end. The cockpit trembled under another direct hit, the force of it slamming Kale against the console hard enough to knock the air from his lungs. Warning lights flooded the space in angry red pulses, alarms screaming over one another in a chaotic chorus. Yeah, I hear you, Kale rasped, gripping the edge of the console as he pulled himself upright. You don't have to keep telling me. The shield indicator blinked once. Then went dark. Hull integrity dropped below 30%. Another hit like that, and the Eidolon drift would tear itself apart. Kale forced his breathing to steady, eyes flicking rapidly across the failing displays. The hunter ship was still behind him, sleek and relentless, gliding through space with terrifying precision. It wasn't rushing. It wasn't panicking. It was hunting. And Kale, he was prey. Of course, he muttered bitterly, because things weren't bad enough. His gaze flickered toward the rear corridor. Toward the cargo hold. Toward the three lives that had turned his quiet, survivable existence into this. He exhaled slowly. Yeah, he whispered, still worth it. Another tremor shook the ship, weaker this time, but only because there wasn't much left to hit. Kale's fingers hovered over the controls. He had options. None of them were good. He could try to outrun them, impossible. He could try to fight, laughable. Or he could stall. Buy time. For what? He didn't know. But it was the only thing left. All right, he said quietly, let's see how stubborn you are. He cut the engines. The sudden silence was deafening. The Eidolon drift drifted forward, momentum carrying it through the void as the hum of the engines faded into nothing. Behind him, the hunter ship slowed. Matching. Watching. Kale leaned back in his seat, eyes fixed on the screen. Come on, he murmured, make your moves. The comm panel crackled. Static. Then, a voice. Cold. Measured. Inhumanly calm. Unregistered vessel, it said. Cut all remaining power and prepare for boarding. Kale snorted softly. Yeah, he muttered, that's not happening. He didn't respond. Didn't acknowledge. Silence stretched between them. Then, the hunter ship moved, closing the distance. Slow, deliberate, confident. Kale's jaw tightened. Right, he said, guess that's a no. He pushed himself to his feet. There was nothing left he could do here. Nothing left to fly. The cockpit was just a waiting room now. And Kale Aaron had never been good at waiting. The corridor felt colder without the engines. The ship's warmth was fading, replaced by the creeping chill of space pressing against weakened hull plating. Kale moved quickly, boots echoing softly as he made his way toward the cargo hold. Each step felt heavier than the last. Not from fear, from certainty. He knew how this ended. Ships like his didn't survive encounters like this. Pilots like him didn't get second chances. And yet, he kept moving. Because there were 3 lives behind that door that didn't deserve to end like this. The cargo door slid open with a soft hiss. And Kale stopped. The air inside shimmered. Not from heat. From energy. It pulsed through the space in slow, rhythmic waves, distorting the light, bending the shadows. The 3 hatchlings stood together. But they were not the same. The smallest no longer trembled. Her tiny body glowed faintly, soft threads of light weaving through her scales like living embers. Her wings were partially extended, the fragile membranes now laced with faint, flickering lines of gold. The middle sister stood beside her, her posture steady, her gaze sharp. A subtle aura surrounded her, the air around her rippling as if responding to her presence. And the largest, she stood at the front. No longer weak. No longer fragile. Her wings spread fully behind her, casting long shadows across the cargo bay. The dullness in her scales had vanished, replaced by a deep, burnished glow that pulsed with power. Her eyes burned, not with fear, with something older, something vast. Kale stared at them, disbelief washing over him. What did you do? He whispered. The largest hatchling turned her head slightly, meeting his gaze. And for the first time, Kale felt it. Not fear, not danger, understanding, a connection, faint, fragile, but undeniable. You're not just hatchlings, he said slowly. The smallest chirped softly, stepping closer to him. She didn't stumble, didn't hesitate. She walked with growing confidence, her tiny claws clicking lightly against the metal floor. Kale knelt instinctively, his eyes never leaving her. What are you? He murmured. She reached him, paused, and then, gently, pressed her head against his hand. Warm, not just physically, warm in a way that sank deeper. That settled somewhere in his chest. Kale inhaled sharply. Hey, he whispered. The middle sister approached next, her movements smooth, controlled. She circled slightly, positioning herself between Kale and the door. Protective, always watching, always aware. And the largest. She remained where she was. Watching, judging, deciding. Kale looked up at her. We've got a problem, he said quietly. As if on cue, the ship shuddered. A heavy metallic impact echoed through the hull. Boarding clamps. Kale's expression hardened. They're here. The smallest made a soft, questioning sound. The middle tensed. And the largest. She stepped forward. Slow, deliberate. Her gaze locked onto Kale's. And in that moment, he understood. Not words, not thoughts, but intent. Stay behind me. Kale blinked. Yeah, he said softly, I don't think that's how this works. Another impact. Closer. Metal groanings. They were cutting their way in. Kale stood, reaching instinctively for the plasma cutter at his side. It felt small now. Insignificant. But it was what he had. I'll slow them down, he said. The largest hatchling didn't move. Didn't agree. Didn't refuse. She simply watched him. Kale gave a short, humorless laugh. Yeah, he muttered, you're right, bad plans. The ship shuddered again. A section of the outer hull gave way with a deafening tear. Atmosphere alarms blared. Time was up. Kale took a step back. Then another, positioning himself between the sisters and the door. I'll stay here, he said. It was pointless. They wouldn't listen. But he said it anyway. Because it was the only thing he could do. The first breach came with a scream of metal. The cargo door buckled inward, sparks flying as a cutting beam tore through the locking mechanism. Kale raised the plasma cutter, his grip tightening. All right, he whispered, let's do this. The door exploded inward. And they came through. 3 figures. Armored. Weapons raised. Precise. Efficient. The lead soldier stepped forward, his helmet scanning the cargo hold. Targets located, he said flatly. Kale didn't hesitate. He fired. The plasma cutter flared, a bright arc of energy striking the soldier's chest. The armor held. Of course it did. The soldier didn't even flinch. Yeah, Kale muttered, had to try. The second soldier raised his weapon. Kale braced. There was no dodging this. No escaping. This was it. Then, fire. Not from the weapons. From behind him. A blinding surge of golden light erupted across the cargo hold, heat slamming into Kale like a physical force. He staggered, shielding his eyes. What? The world exploded into motion. The smallest hatchling darted past him, faster than anything that size should have been able to move. A streak of light followed her, trailing behind her like a comet. She collided with the second soldier. And the armor ignited. Not melted. Not damaged. Burned. As if it had been made of paper. The soldier screamed, dropping his weapon as flames engulfed him. Kale stared. You've got to be kidding me. The middle sister moved next. But she didn't attack. She shifted. The air around her warped, bending in unnatural ways. The third soldier fired. And the shot curved. Literally curved. The beam twisted mid-flight, veering off course and slamming harmlessly into the far wall. Kale blinked. That's new. The soldier adjusted, firing again. Same result. The space around her distorted every shot, bending reality itself to protect her. And the largest. She stepped forward. And everything stopped. Not physically, but instinctively. Even the soldiers hesitated. Because something about her was wrong. Not wrong as in broken. Wrong as in ancient. Her wings spread wide, filling the cargo bay with shadow and light. The glow beneath her scales intensified, pulsing with a deep, resonant power. Her eyes burned like twin stars. And when she moved, the floor trembled. She didn't rush. Didn't lunge. She simply walked forward. And with each step, the air grew heavier. Hotter. The lead soldier raised his weapon, firing directly at her. The blast struck and vanished. Not deflected. Not absorbed. Gone. As if it had never existed. Kale's breath caught. That's not possible. The largest hatchling tilted her head slightly. Then, she opened her mouth. And breathed. Not fire. Not exactly. Light. Pure, concentrated energy poured from her jaws, a beam of molten gold that struck the lead soldier and tore through him like he wasn't there. The armor didn't resist. Didn't slow it. It simply ceased to exist. The beam carved through the wall behind him, slicing through layers of reinforced metal as if they were nothing. Silence fell. The remaining soldier dropped his weapon. Backed away. Slowly. Fear. Real fear. Kale didn't blame him. He felt it too. The largest hatchling stepped forward again. And the soldier ran. He didn't make it far. The smallest intercepted him, a streak of blazing light, and the fight ended in an instant. Then, silence. The cargo hold was still. Smoke drifted through the air. The glow began to fade. Kale stood frozen, staring at the three sisters. You, he said slowly, are not normal. The smallest chirped proudly, her glow dimming. The middle relaxed, the distortion around her fading. And the largest, she turned, looking at him. And for a moment, the power receded. Not gone, but quieter, contained. She stepped closer, slowly, carefully, until she stood directly in front of him. Kale swallowed. Yeah, he murmured, you saved me. She tilted her head. And then, gently, she lowered it, pressing her forehead against his chest. Warm, steady, alive. Kale let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Guess that makes us even, he said softly. Behind them, the damaged hull groaned. The ship was still dying. But for the first time, Kale wasn't facing it alone. He looked down at the three sisters, at the creatures he had found starving, abandoned, left to die. And now, they stood between him and death itself. All right, he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. New plan. The smallest perked up. The middle watched him closely. The largest remained still. Listening. We fix the ship, Kale continued. We get out of here. He paused, then added quietly. And we make sure nobody ever tries that again. The largest hatchling's eyes glowed faintly. As if she understood. As if she agreed. Kale straightened, looking toward the shattered doorway. Beyond it, the void. Cold. Endless. Dangerous. But now, not unbeatable. Yeah, he said, I think we've got a chance. And as the Eidolon drift drifted through the darkness, broken, burned, but still alive, four unlikely survivors stood together. A pilot who refused to abandon what mattered, and three sisters who had gone from starving shadows to something far more powerful than anyone could have imagined. Something ancient, something unstoppable, something that had chosen to protect.